Hello, today we are going to reassemble a thermostat assembly on a Homelite Bearcat outboard. The thermostat underwent 3 generations of different types of cooling system over the production cycle of the Homelite Bearcat engine. The first generation of Homelite Bearcat did not have a thermostat at all. In fact, it just had the exhaust manifold and no thermostat whatsoever. Now, if you operate your outboard in summertime recreationally in lakes and streams, there really isn't any need for a thermostat at all. In fact, the late Ed Ewing, who worked on these until he was 101 years old, when he would rebuild one, he would eliminate the thermostat altogether, fashioning a blanking plate that would go over the thermostat provision in the back of the exhaust manifold, and he would eliminate the return water line altogether. But the reason that Homelite began using a thermostat was that the commercial fishermen, areas like Alaska, they're out in 33, 35 degree water. The engines were not coming up to operating temperature. When an engine does not warm up completely, you're not getting the full performance out of the engine. It's designed to run at a certain operating temperature. But more importantly, the oil is not getting hot enough to evaporate off condensation that gets in your crankcase. And so that was causing the oil in these engines to turn to sludge, and they were having lubrication problems and performance problems. So Homelite decided to implement a thermostat. The first generation of thermostat that Homelite used had a return line off of the bottom, and until the engine warmed up, that water just recirculated back down to the water pump, and then when it got hot enough on the engine, valve would shut, and that water, instead of going down to the water pump, would go through the block and cool the engine. It was kind of primitive. It was basically a on-off switch, not very precise. The final generation of Homelite and Bearcats had a very precision thermostat on them, and we're going to reassemble that one today. So we're going to start off with the outer assembly, and you've got this plate that the water hose hooks to that goes around the back of the engine. Inside of that is a backflow valve. This little white valve helps prevent backflow through the system. It will nest down inside like that. Holding it in place and giving it just a little pressure is a light duty spring that will nest right inside that backflow valve. Now, as we assemble this, we need to keep it horizontal because that backflow valve likes to pop out and tip over on its side and cause problems. The next item that goes in is a fairly heavy duty spring, and it nests right inside the housing like that. Next thing that I like to do is run up a couple of my bolts to help me guide things together as I'm assembling the thermostat. The next piece is a diaphragm with this plastic valve in the middle. The side that sticks out is going to go towards the spring, and you want to make sure that the water passage that's exposed is at the bottom. Next is this plate right here, and again, it's got a smooth side and a concave side. The concave side is going to go towards the diaphragm, and again, you're lining up the water passage at the bottom. So being this is under spring pressure and that little backflow valve is going to want to come undone, we're going to use a wire tie to kind of hold this together while we work on assembling the rest of this. So I'm just going to pull that tight. Like that. Now that I have done that, I am going to look down inside, and you can see if your you can see if your backflow valve has shifted out of place. And if it has, you're gonna have to go back in there and start over and get it the right direction, but we're good to go there. I'm gonna set that to the side. I'm gonna go to my exhaust manifold. Now, when you took yours apart, these studs, one or more of them, probably all of them broke. They like to rust. Much worse if it's been salt water, but again, these motors are, they're 60 years old, some of them. So you likely will have had to cut those smooth, drill them out, and tap them. I'm using an old manifold here just for the video, but you want your mating surface to be clean and smooth. This little plastic piece is called a diverter valve, or it's just a diverter. There is a hole inside the manifold, right up in this corner, right down here. And we're going to position this as such that this little area right here covers that hole. And most likely this'll nestle there in its correct location. That is going to be followed by another fairly stiff spring that sits down inside of that diverter. You're going to use a new gasket. If you've got the correct thickness gasket and your mating surfaces are smooth, there's really no need to use any sealant on this. If you can't come up with a new old stock gasket like I've got here, and you're making one yourself, you might have to use some sealant on that. The next thing is called your thermostat element, and it is got a fat end and a skinny end. The fat end will sit right down inside of that spring. We're then going to take our top assembly, the water passage towards the bottom. We're going to get the narrow part of the thermostat element to ride right inside the center of this block assembly. And we're going to press down, start our screws. Make sure they're not cross-threading. Get them tight enough so that we know the spring isn't going to bounce this thing across the room, but not so tight that I can't get the wire tie out. All right. Finally, we're going to cut the wire tie, pull that out, put in the rest of our bolts. We're going to do a cross pattern on this, tightening them up. They do not need torqued a whole lot. This is plastic and you don't want to break it. The manual says 50 inch-pounds is the amount that you tighten at. It's really just a good snug. If you go too tight, you're going to crack your new old stock parts, and that's not going to be fun. And so that is how you assemble the thermostat on your Bearcat 55 outboard.